Good morning, students. So today, let us have an overview on Stridor, and let us know how to evaluate a patient with Stridor and how you manage a patient with Stridor. Okay, you should know how to approach a patient with Stridor. Before that, let us know the definition of Stridor. Stridor is an abnormal, high-pitched sound that is produced by turbulent airflow through a partially obstructed airway at the level of supraglottis, glottis, subglottis, and or trachea. It should be differentiated from stertor, which is a low-pitched, snoring type sound generated at the level of nasopharynx, oropharynx, and occasionally supraglottis. Let me tell you that Stridor is just a symptom, not a diagnosis per se, or it's not a disease. And we have to know the exact underlying cause. So Stridor may be inspiratory, expiratory, or it can be biphasic, depending on its timing in respiratory cycle. Inspiratory Stridor actually happens when there is any obstruction in the upper airway during inspiration, while expiratory Stridor is any obstruction in bronchus, whereas biphasic Stridor suggests a tracheal or a subglottic or a glottic anomaly. Okay. Now, how do you exactly know that the patient is in Stridor? What exactly happens when there is Stridor? Stridor actually results from partial obstruction of an airway with turbulent flow characteristics. Such respiratory tract areas are the upper airways, glottis, and trachea. The obstruction can be fixed or it can be variable. Variable extrathoracic obstructions are primarily associated with inspiratory Stridor. This is because during inspiration, extrathoracic intraluminal airway pressure is negative relative to atmospheric pressure, leading to collapse of supraglottic structures. So during expiration, intrathoracic pressure is positive and tends to collapse the airway. Thus, Stridor caused by intrathoracic obstructions tend to be more prominent upon expiration. Stridor heard during both phases of respiration is usually due to either a fixed airway obstruction or two areas of obstruction, that is intrathoracic and extrathoracic. So let us come to the causes. What causes Stridor? Stridor may result from lesions involving central nervous system, cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal system, respiratory tract also. So I would like to classify the causes of Stridor according to age and the onset. So in newborns, Laryngomalacia is the most commonest cause of Stridor. Second most commonest cause of Stridor in newborn is vocal cord dysfunction. Then comes your congenital tumors, choanal atresia, laryngeal webs, and so on. Now, as the child grows, in the children, mainly around maybe around 8 to 10 years, or can be even more than 5 years. So that time, you will come across the most common condition, which is your croup, or there can be a foreign body sensation or laryngeal dyskinesia. Okay, you can come across this condition even in toddlers. And the causes of Stridor in adults include acute epiglottitis, laryngitis, trauma, carcinoma larynx or trachea or main bronchus. Now, this is a view of normal larynx, endolarynx visualized using a video laryngoscope. This is anterior, that's the posterior part. You can see the epiglottis, epiglottic folds on either side. These are the true vocal cords, and that's the piriform sinus arytenoids, and that's the posterior cricoid region and continues as esophagus. So this is how your larynx appears during inspiration, and this is expiration. The vocal cords are wide open and the vocal cords are totally obstructed. I mean, in contact with each other. This is normal. This is during expiration and this is during phonation. So this is something abnormal. If you can see the shape of the epiglottis, it's omega shaped, and you can see flappy A folds, very short and rudiment epiglottic folds, and redundant mucosa over the arytenoids. This is one of the causes, most common cause of stridor in infants. This is Laryngomalacia, wherein you can see floppy epiglottis. Whenever the child tries to inspire, there is collapse of the laryngeal inlet, causing stridor. These are some of the other causes of stridor. You can see all these are endoscopic images. This is a laryngeal web. And now this is an X-ray of a patient with acute laryngotracheobronchitis. Because of inflammation, you can see the narrowing of the subglottis region. This is called a steeple sign. This is a lateral view, plain X-ray, where you can see there is edematous epiglottis, which is called thumb sign. Now, how do you evaluate a patient with stridor? You have to take a thorough history, do a proper physical examination, and then proceed with investigations, and then how you manage. Every child is different and they present with a different pathology. So the treatment is tailor-made. A thorough history is something very important to come to a proper diagnosis. Take name, age, address, everything, patient profile. This is very important for documentation purpose. And then if the patient is in stridor, you should know the exact duration, the onset, progression, whether it is sudden in onset or was it insidious, and then was it acute or is it chronic. You have to evaluate properly. Then place particular emphasis on the age of onset, duration, severity, precipitating events, the position of the child, quality and nature of crying, presence of aphonia, and other associated symptoms like paroxysmal cough, aspiration, difficulty feeding, drooling, sleeping disorders, elicit history of change in color, if at all there is cyanosis or and apnea to determine the severity of stridor. Now, other examination, complete thorough ENT, respiratory tract, cardiovascular system, GIT, and CNS, all that is mandatory. Complete evaluation, complete examination is very important to come into proper diagnosis. Maternal endotracheal intubation, use and duration. Perinatal history, you have to ask about the developmental history. Feeding and growth history should be evaluated because significant airway obstruction can lead to caloric waste, resulting in lack or slow weight gain and growth. Additionally, regurgitation and spitting out could be a sign of gastroesophageal reflux that can cause irritation of the mucosa of the larynx and trachea that could lead to edema and stridor. Other history like medical history, drug history, social, family history, everything is very important. Very important is do not try to examine the throat in patient with stridor, as this may induce laryngospasm and total airway obstruction. So we generally start by looking at patient and we look if the child is cyanosed, or if the child is using any accessory muscles of respiration, how is the nasal flare, if at all, if it is there, then level of consciousness and responsiveness. Look for vital signs. We must do routine full examination like other patients. We start by doing ENT examination, then do a respiratory examination, and then cardiovascular, and so on. Important notes that you should remember while doing physical examination. If distress is severe, further examination should be deferred until patient reaches the facility equipped for emergency management of pediatric AV. Physical examination of patient with suspected acute epiglottitis is contraindicated. The patient may prefer certain positions that alleviate stridor. Note the presence of infection in the oral cavity, crepitations or masses in the soft tissues of face, neck, or chest, and deviation of the trachea. Use care when examining the oral cavity or pharynx because sudden dislodgement of foreign body or rupture of an abscess can further compromise AV. Drooling from mouth suggests poor handling of secretions. Observe the character of cough, cry, and voice. Presence of fever and toxicity generally implies serious bacterial infections. Careful auscultation of nose, oropharynx, neck, and chest helps to discern the location of stridor. In infants, give special attention to craniofacial morphology, patency of nares. That is, you have to rule out choanal atresia. Growth parameters are very helpful, especially in evaluation of chronic stridor. Especially this is important when a child is having laryngomalacia, and usually they will have symptoms related to failure to thrive. They usually don't have good nutrition because of no proper nutrition. They may have a malnourished look. So what are the investigations they would like to do? Generally, no investigations required for mild stridor. On initial evaluation, the oxygen saturation determines the severity of stridor and respiratory compromise. For severe, moderate to severe cases, arterial blood gas analysis may be needed. Other evaluations may be performed as dictated by the clinical situation. Now, what are the imaging studies you would like to do? AP and lateral radiographs of neck and chest are useful to evaluate airways and lungs. High kilovoltage short exposure endolateral airway X-rays or inspiratory and expiratory or lateral decubitus X-rays to demonstrate air trapping may be useful to supplement AP and lateral X-rays. Barium esophagogram may be performed if you're suspecting tracheoesophageal fistula. Contrast enhanced CT demonstrate mediastinal masses, so that can be done in an MRI in vascular anomalies. If GR is suspected, do a pH probe or barium swallow. You can do a pulmonary function test, and you can do an obstructive sleep study. Now, how do you manage a case of stridor? You can broadly classify into medical and surgical treatment. Medical care is actually tailored according to the situation. Emergent management consists of ensuring there is adequate. If not, resuscitative measures should be initiated as early as possible. If it is inflammatory conditions, they may require antibiotics, and while steroids are something very useful in these situations. Diet, patients with moderate to severe stridor should never be given nothing by mouth in preparation for possible intubation, laryngoscopy, bronchoscopy, and tracheostomy. So surgical care, certain conditions, especially severe laryngomalacia or laryngeal stridor, laryngeal stenosis, tracheal stenosis, laryngeal tumors, laryngeal papillomas, hemangiomas, etc., and foreign bodies aspiration or vocal cord palsy may need surgical correction. The most commonly performed procedure in emergency or whenever the child is coming with moderate to severe stridor is tracheostomy. So other conditions such as retropharyngeal and peritonsillar abscesses have to be dealt with on emergency basis. Now, I would like to briefly outline about tracheostomy, which is the most common emergency procedure done as an ENT surgeon. Tracheostomy is a surgical procedure wherein an opening is made in the anterior wall of the trachea and converting it into a stoma on the skin surface. So what are the indications? It can be classified according to respiratory obstructions, retained secretions, respiratory insufficiency, or elective indications. So what are the indications of tracheostomy when there is obstruction? Infections. Not all infections do need tracheostomy. It is only when there is moderate to severe tracheostomy, wherein if the condition permits, if the situation of the child is deteriorating, only then we consider tracheostomy. Otherwise, most of the patients are treated medically. So acute laryngotracheobronchitis, acute epiglottitis, diphtheria, Ludwig's angina, peritonsillitis, retropharyngeal, parapharyngeal. These are some of the inflammatory conditions where the child may need tracheostomy. Trauma, external injuries like blunt injury, or it can be a penetrating injury, a fracture of a mandible or maxillofacial injuries may need tracheostomy. Some of the benign and malignant lesions, foreign body, laryngeal edema, bilateral abductor palsy, congenital anomalies like web and cysts sometimes may need, but bilateral abductor palsy, definitely it's an emergency wherein you have to do a tracheostomy as early as possible. Indications for retained secretions. When you do tracheostomy for retained secretions. Now, if the patient is unable to cough in a comatose patients following head injury, or if there is paralysis of respiratory muscles, maybe in conditions like Guillain-Barré syndrome or myasthenia gravis, bulbar palsy, yes, definitely tracheostomy is needed. Painful cough like chest injuries following a road traffic accident, aspiration of pharyngeal secretions, especially bilateral laryngeal paralysis, yes, tracheostomy can be considered. Respiratory insufficiency, especially in chronic lung conditions where you need to do toileting. You have to drain out whatever secretions are there so that it's not left behind in the lung, causing secondary infections. Chronic emphysema, chronic bronchitis, bronchiectasis. So there is insufficiency of the secretions, whatever is produced, it cannot come out. So for proper cleansing, tracheostomy may be required. As an elective procedure in any major mouth and larynx surgery, yes, definitely tracheostomy is indicated. Now you have high tracheostomy, mid tracheostomy, and low tracheostomy. Mid tracheostomy is something which is commonly done. It is done at the level of isthmus, that is second and third tracheal ring. That is done most commonly because there are less side effects or there are less risk compared to your high or low tracheostomy. So that is the most preferred type. Or you can classify it into according to whether the tracheostomy is done as an emergency procedure or as an elective procedure, or whether it is temporary or whether it is permanent. Now, I would like to briefly outline how the tracheostomy is performed. Now, positioning of the patient is something very important. Patient is made to lie in a supine position with a head ring and a shoulder pillow. That is actually the position which will help us to define the Jackson's triangle. So you infiltrate the Jackson's triangle. The triangle is actually, you have the base at the level of the cricoid cartilage and apex at the suprasternal notch. And on either side, you have the anterior border of sternocleidomastoid. So next thing is you infiltrate the Jackson's triangle with local anesthetic agent. And then the incision chosen is vertical, horizontal. It can be either of the incisions can be used. You can use a vertical incision or an horizontal incision. So after incising, tissues are dissected in the midline, dilated veins either displaced or ligated. Strap muscles are then separated in midline and retracted laterally. Strap muscles are your sternohyoid and then sternothyroid. Then thyroid isthmus is displaced upwards or divided between the clams and suture. Then tracheal rings will be seen. And then you have to hook the isthmus. That's the tracheal ring. So you have to infiltrate the trachea with 4% xylocaine, and then that actually helps us indirectly to know whether you are in trachea exactly or not. Try to aspirate a bit of the fluid, that is xylocaine, filled in the syringe. As you aspirate, you see air bubbles. That confirms that you are in airway, that is nothing but your trachea. And infiltrate few drops of xylocaine so that will have an anesthetic effect. Tracheal ring will be removed in adults, but not in pediatric patients. Then you create a stroma, you take out a piece of cartilage, and then you insert the proper sized tracheostomy tube and secure with tapes. Skin should not be sutured too tightly. That may actually cause, subcutaneous emphysema. So in pediatric tracheostomy, the tracheal wall will not be removed. You just make an vertical incision. Post-op care is something very important. You have to prevent tube displacement, and you have to take care of the inner tube. Humidification and prevention of crusting is also very important. The change of the tube should be done. The inner tube has to be cleaned very often, whereas your outer tube should not be removed for at least 48 to 72 hours following the procedure. By doing so, it will be very difficult to put it back. 48 to 72 hours is required actually for the formation of tract. So better not to remove the outer tube for at least 72 hours. So patient will lose their voice. So that has to be priorly intimated to the patient, and consent has to be obtained accordingly. Frequent suctioning and prevention of infection is also very important. Now, what are the complications you come across following tracheostomy? It can be immediate, intermediate, and late. What are the immediate complications? Hemorrhage, air embolism, apnea, cardiac arrest, or any local damage to the thyroid, cricoid, or licorian laryngeal nerve. Intermediate complications could be dislodgement of tube, surgical emphysema, pneumothorax, tracheal necrosis, infection, tracheoesophageal fistula, or dysphagia. Late complications are tracheal stenosis, difficulty in decannulating the tube, and then tracheocutaneous fistula. So what are the commonly used tracheostomy tubes? Tubes can be metallic or non-metallic. Metallic, we usually use Fuller's biflange tube or a Jackson's tube. Non-metallic is usually cuffed or a non-cuffed vortex tube. Thank you. Stridor is an alarming symptom. Don't let it pass.